You'll have spent your whole working life building up to a pension, but how do you actually know what happens when you come to take it and how much income it will really give you? There's a huge amount of content out there about saving and investing for retirement, but very little about what actually happens when you get there and how to turn that pot into an income. So in this video, I'm going to use a £500,000 pension as an example and walk you through your main options, how much you'd realistically get from each, the tax that comes with it, and the inheritance change coming in 2027 that could affect how you spend the money. Now, £500,000 might sound like a lot, or it might sound like miles off. It doesn't really matter, it's just there to give us something to work with. And you can scale everything I say up or down to whatever you expect your own pot to look like. One thing just to be clear on, this is about defined contribution pensions, where you've built up a pot of money, not a defined benefit or a final salary pension that pays you a set income. So first we'll look at drawdown options and then we'll move on to annuities. But in either case, you can take up to 25% of your pot tax-free. And that's one of your first big decisions when it comes to drawdown. You can choose to take up to 25% of your pot completely tax-free and leave the remaining 75% invested. Or you can keep the whole pot invested and then each withdrawal you make, 25% will be tax-free with the rest being taxable. The temptation could be to take the full amount straight away. But the question you've got to ask is what you'd actually do with it. If you're paying off a mortgage, fine, that's a clear use. But if you're just going to stick it in a savings account or reinvest it, you need to think about the tax. You can only put £20,000 a year in an ISA, so a big lump sum beyond that is sitting in a taxable environment, and any growth or interest could be taxed. Whereas if you leave it in the pension, it keeps growing tax-free, and you get 25% of every withdrawal tax-free anyway. So unless you've got a specific need for the cash, there's often little reason to rush. Regardless of which route you take though, how you calculate the limit for the amount you can withdraw each year is the same. To work out the level of income you can take, you need to decide a withdrawal rate. And this is where the famous 4% rule comes in. The idea is that you withdraw 4% in the first year, and then you increase that amount by inflation each year. And because your pot should, on average, grow by more than you're taking out, this approach has been considered sustainable for at least 30 years. On a £500,000 pot, 4% gives you £20,000 in the first year, rising with inflation after that. If you pushed it to 5%, that's £25,000 a year, and that assumes you've left the whole 500k invested. If you took your 25% tax-free cash first, you'd be drawing £375,000 instead. At 4%, that's £15,000 a year, and at 5%, it's £18,750. I'm not going to go through every tax scenario, so I'll just keep those as gross figures. On the withdrawal rate, historically higher rates of 6 or 7% have worked, but there's no guarantee they will in the future, and that's exactly why 4% is treated as a safe number. There's also a reason you can't just bank on an average return of say 9%, and it's called sequencing risk. Two people can retire with the same pot and the same average return over their retirement and end up in completely different places, purely because of the sequencing of returns. If the market falls sharply right at the start of your retirement, you're taking withdrawals from a pot that's already dropping, and it never really gets a chance to recover. But if that same crash comes 10 years in, you've had a decade of growth behind you first, so it hurts a lot less. In reality, nobody draws a fixed percentage like a robot. The whole point of drawdown is the flexibility. If markets have a bad year, you can ease off, skip the holiday and trim the discretionary spending, just like you would in normal life. You can also choose where you take the income from. If you're holding a mix of equities, bonds and cash, you take from equities when they're up and then bonds or cash when equities are down. That allows the stock market time to recover before you sell any of it. That flexibility is the biggest strength of drawdown. The biggest risk is really yourself, as you have full control over your portfolio. But the one thing that might change how you spend it is the changes coming to inheritance tax next year. Up to now, your unused pot is sat outside of your estate, so it's escaped inheritance tax entirely, which made a pension a brilliant way to pass wealth down to your kids. That is changing. From the 6th of April 2027, most unused pension funds will be counted as part of your estate for inheritance tax, and anything above the nil rate band could be taxed at 40%. It gets worse when you add in the income tax rules. If you die before age 75, your beneficiaries can usually inherit your pension free of income tax. If you die at 75 or older, they pay income tax at their own rate on whatever they withdraw. So from 2027, if you die after 75 with a big unused pot, your family could face inheritance tax at 40% on it, and then income tax when they draw what's left. That's potentially 2 tax hits on the same money. And that leaves you with a real question you'll have to answer yourself. how much do you want to leave behind? Depending on your other assets, you may decide to pass down some inheritance early or be a bit more relaxed about spending it down in your lifetime. There's no right answer here, it's just something worth taking into account. Now on to the second option, an annuity. This is where you hand your pot or part of it to an insurer and they pay you a guaranteed income. You give up flexibility and access to the capital, and in return, you get certainty for life. The rate you're offered depends on a load of factors. Your age and health are the big ones because the provider is essentially working out how long they'll be paying you. It's almost the opposite of applying for health insurance. You're far better off being honest about every condition you've got because poorer health gets you a higher income. Then there's a type of annuity. Do you want it to rise with inflation? Do you want it to keep paying a partner after you die? Do you want it for life or just a fixed period? Each feature you add will usually lower your starting income. To give you an idea, current rates are about the best they've been in over 15 years. A healthy 65-year-old buying a lifetime annuity with income rising at 3% each year and 50% of the income being passed on to a surviving partner would get around 5.2% today. I've worked this out using a 375k pension pot, as you would have taken the 25% tax-free cash from the 500k pot. This also includes a 5-year guarantee period, meaning that if you die within the first 5 years, the income continues to be paid to a beneficiary for the remainder of that guarantee period. So this provides an income of £19,751 in the first year, that then increases by 3% every year for the rest of your life. Whether an annuity turns out to be a good decision depends heavily on how long you live. In this example, it would take roughly just over 15 years to receive back the amount you invested. The reason annuities have come back into fashion is simply that interest rates are much higher than they were through the last decade. When rates were near zero, the income on offer was so poor that annuities were deeply unpopular. So whatever's happening with rates when you come to buy plays a massive role in what you get. And that's not something you can control, just something to be aware of. The key advantage of an annuity is guaranteed income, regardless of market performance. The main drawback is the loss of flexibility. Once that capital is handed over, it's generally no longer accessible, and if you die earlier than expected, you may not receive back the full value of what you paid in. Having flexibility is the main benefit of drawdown. The money remains yours, and any remaining funds can be passed on to beneficiaries. The main disadvantage is the risk of running out of money if investment returns are poor or withdrawals are too high. What a lot of people actually do is blend an annuity with drawdown. You might choose to cover your essential expenses with an annuity plus the state pension, so regardless of what the markets do, you can keep the lights on, and then use drawdown for your discretionary spending. That way you keep peace of mind and flexibility combined. One last thing, if you go down the drawdown route, your pot stays invested, and that means you've still got to choose what is actually invested in. If you want a starting point for low-cost diversified funds to research from, I've put together a free ETF cheat sheet that you can download using the link in the description. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.